going to get started. We welcome the members of the public who are in person and who may be watching our usual video feeds online. Just waiting. It's like a teacher. You just keep talking until everybody shh. I'm happy to share that we have returned to a hybrid meeting approach. Hybrid council meetings allow people to join online through WebEx or in person at the City County building. It is so nice to be meeting again in person and to be here with members of the public, my fellow council members, and our city staff. We are continuing to watch COVID rates to make the safest choice for all of us. If you are here joining us on site, the Council is following CDC guidelines to prevent and reduce transmission of COVID-19 and maintain healthy business operations and work environments. Per an executive order signed by Mayor Mendenhall, face coverings are required for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals inside Salt Lake City facilities. Therefore, we are asking everyone to keep your face coverings on at all times. For city staff and people here for briefing items, when you are addressing the council, you can remove it to ensure we can hear your comments. Our staff is also here to help with seating in the audience so the social distancing can also be maintained. If you choose not to wear a face covering, we will ask you to leave. As many of you know, there's no public comment during a work session. However, please join us for the 7 p.m. formal meeting tonight to share any comments. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145-476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114, or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. That brings us to our first agenda item, and that would be updates from the administration. Madam Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to invite you to our table here. We also have Rachel Otto, Lisa Schaefer, and Andrew Johnston at some point available to give updates. So I will turn the time over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Thanks for this time. And we could go up to the slide deck if council staff has that. And the first slide. Thanks. No change in our counties in the very high transmission rate, but the ICU utilization is down just a little bit for COVID ICU, although the ICUs are totally full statewide. So not a lot of opportunity to expand in there, but the COVID numbers are slightly down. Still around 22% of children statewide have had their first shot. We're going to have some Salt Lake County specifics for you in just a couple of slides. And just over 500,000 people have received their booster shot, excuse me. We can go to that next slide. The cases right now statewide are down more than we usually get to show you. And it's pretty similar number, in terms of the school-aged case comparison to the total cases. 12 new deaths reported today. The average is still about 1,100, and only 57% of Utahns are fully vaccinated. Next slide, please. The figures that we're showing today are the lowest we've seen on a Tuesday update since August, and that's excluding Labor Day weekend because the reporting was kind of messed up from that weekend. But numbers are lower, fortunately, at the moment. 2 Omicron confirmed cases, both in vaccinated but unboosted people. And as we told you last week, the county health department has found that the weekend vaccination clinics are really popular, and they're the only ones that don't require an appointment. So through the end of January, they have those expanded weekend vaccination clinics. And I think you have that link, but we'll be happy to share it with you again.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know if those weekend vaccination clinics also include the booster?
I believe they do.
They do? Okay. I've seen lots of nods just for public information. Thanks.
Okay. Next slide, please. Here's the countywide dashboard for Salt Lake City in particular. You can see, again, those numbers kind of coming down a little bit. Let's go to the next slide, though, and we have some more specifics. The county has seen 25% of our 5 to 11-year-olds receive their first dose. And that's just an interesting stat. This is from Dr. Dunn's presentation to the County Council today. She shared some of those slides with us to share with you today. So that's why you're seeing the pullout of 9.5% of the 25% being administered by the County Health Department. Next slide, please. This one's interesting, as you'll see that the zip codes with the highest percent of vaccinated 5 to 11-year-olds include Salt Lake City zip codes, 84103, 108, and 109. The lowest vaccinated 5 to 11-year-old zip codes are not in Salt Lake City, but they're in West Valley and West Jordan. And so 25% have received their first dose, 13% are fully vaccinated at this point. Next slide, please. And this one, you can look at the yellow boxes as the high mark, the blue boxes as the low mark for those columns. Salt Lake City, of course, as you've known since school started, has been really at the lowest rates there. And then the percent, that last column with the percent of eligible community members fully vaccinated, we have by far the highest number of 5 to 11-year-olds getting vaccinated in the counties, among county school districts, but we still have low numbers with our adult population in our west side and some central city areas. So that's where we're basically on par with the rest of the county at 64% total. Next slide, please. And this one, we show you this every week, but I think it's interesting if you focus on the October 19th column and compare that to where we're at today. We saw really a leveling out of the fully vaccinated, and we're starting to see more movement in the partials. And then 84104 and 84116 has seen about a percentage increase week over week that we've presented to you, but finally starting to see the partials, and those are very much the kids coming online. So citywide average is 67% vaccinated. Next slide, please. And this is the last one of my section on the COVID update. Again, I think looking from October 19th to December 14th today to see the movement in those percentages, but very slow adoption. And as always, if you want to see other data or if there's a way that we could present it to you that would be more useful, please let us know. We want to bring you COVID information that you can distill and make sense to our population. So I'll turn the time over to Andrew Johnston.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. You'll see the slide that we see a lot of here, the weekly census of the resource centers. On the far right, you'll see that new column, which is the overflow at St. Vincent de Paul. The numbers have gone up slightly since our last discussion. We're sitting at about 98% capacity night over night across all three of those. St. Vincent de Paul has run at 62 on average beds. Now, if you were really paying attention very, very closely, you'll remember perhaps that we had 58 beds there technically. Because the resource centers do a snapshot every night at one time about their total capacity, that's why it's a little off sometimes for what you might hear. There might be more people in there than not. In St. Vincent de Paul, they'll actually count every person in a bed. So that's why they could have 62 people come in one night for 58 beds. We do that just to ensure that there's a full picture of how many folks are coming in during the middle of the night for services. And we'll try and do that as well, I think, for the other overflows that come on. What you won't see here is the Wigan Center quite yet. Still running into staffing shortages there, trying to hire up. Volunteers of America is trying very hard to get more staff there so they can open as soon as possible. And they're still projecting to try and do so this month, but they're not quite sure.
Andrew, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
When you say they take a snapshot, is there like they count at 9 o'clock at night and then they come back and count at 11 o'clock at night and then come back and count at 1 o'clock in the morning or something, like whatever those hours are? That's kind of...
Yeah, the resource centers will do that internally. The official number that goes to the state through HIMIS is one of those, the 7 a.m. count, though.
Okay.
And so if you look at the internal numbers, you'll see some fluctuation sometimes, but that one number is that standard that's used across the state.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide. At the end of this calendar year, and this is your last meeting as a council here, so we want to make sure you have some information on the activities of the HEART team and what the city money has gone towards for mostly unsheltered work this year. You'll see here about the resource fairs that were run across the city. 31 service providers, 400 people. You'll see the number of adults connected to services, the vaccinations, and on down the court cases heard, the volunteers, and 22 people permanently housed. One of the hallmarks of the system, the new system in 3 years in now, was no wrong door was the concept. So you didn't have to go into a resource center to get housed. These are folks that did not necessarily go to a resource center who got housed straight from the streets or the river or over their camping. That's a pretty impressive number, particularly knowing how few housing options we've had come online. So we want to keep seeing this go up and make sure there's avenues for everybody to get into housing. The next slide. You'll see from the courts, there's 4 kayak court events and the number of cases heard. The high utilizer docket days, that's fairly new. The Justice Court, Salt Lake City Justice Court, is running on one Friday a month a high utilizer docket where they'll take folks with a lot of charges and cases pending, and they'll try and get them all on one docket so it's easy for everybody to know where and when to go. And so they actually have remote systems in the resource centers, and you can get this online to see your judge and take care of your charges, and that's pretty reliable. So every month you know this Friday I can handle that, versus not knowing where or when to go. And so you'll see how effective that's been so far. And I believe they'll continue to try that into next year and keep evaluating how effective it is. The mobile requests is something you'll see here at the bottom, the 4,500 mobile requests. That's on the Salt Lake City app. I'll say that's a success. Not because there's a lot of requests, but because one of the big efforts has been to allow the public to have easy access to make requests and to communicate with the city. And it's still a work in progress to make sure that we're responding quickly to everybody and make sure they're heard. But this is a great way to get more information more quickly, real time. And then you'll see some of the abatements, the biowaste and trash removals, all funded by city resources.
Do we have any information about the mobile requests by zip code or by district?
I'd have to look at our technical team, but I'm guessing we could do that. Yeah, because you'll have that geo tracking on your request every time you make it.
Yeah, we're pushing it really hard, but like it'd be nice to know if it's working over in our area.
Yeah, I think this is one of those technology things that can be a great benefit. It also maybe shows the level of need we're seeing in the city. It could also potentially show us where we're getting more requests, and that might tell us different things. We've known for a long time about how people report some things and not report other things, or based on where you live, you might report more things. It could give us some insights into that as well, potentially. But if you're interested, we could do some more research on that. Next slide. This is the last slide, and I want to bring up the HEART team. I did plagiarize this from the website, so just so you know. But I wanted their faces attached here. Michelle Hoon, Dylan Haas, Allison Dupler, and Zoe Stewart. That is the HEART team for the city. They're the ones who make all that happen. What is the resource fairs, kayak court, et cetera. They're coordinating. They're taking every request that comes through that app, and they're trying to make sure it gets to the right people and gets addressed. You can get a sense of the size of their role, and so I want to make sure they got called out today for the work they're doing and continue to do, and that you've continued to fund. So I appreciate your efforts here as a council and their efforts as well.
Councilmember Petra Eschler, your geo-tracking, we do that, and when we kicked off that dashboard about a year ago, there was it was live, and it would show sort of how old the requests are, but we're going to re-up that link for you, and we'll send it over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And and Andrew Johnston, and was just going to open it up for questions. So, Councilmember Petra Eschler.
We've had our first snow now, and the Wigan Center, neither the Wigan Center nor the Ramada was open. Are there any reports from that? I mean, did the shelters have to take in more people? What was the consequence of that? If there
the
are
weather
any
issues. The struggle with the resource centers themselves is there is a hard cap on the number of beds that can go in there, so they can't exceed it. And they'll try and make sure that they're filling every bed throughout the night as they come up, even walk-ins and things. The Wigan Center would be a great benefit if we can get that open as soon as possible, but it would be overnight, not during the daytime, obviously. The Ramada, they've closed, as far as I understand, the contract on that property. They can start doing the work on the property. They're working on all the safety and security measures that were discussed here at this council meetings. And then they're also hiring up. The sooner the better. Everybody wants to get that going as soon as possible. There is some work to do still there, though. We do know that there's going to be more snow this week. We do know it's a big stressor on those who are unsheltered out there. We do know that it means we have more folks looking for services as well. And I'm sure your council member Ferris could also talk about the outreach sort of work that they do during those storms. But we desperately need more indoor options as soon as possible.
Council members, are there other questions for either Andrew or Madam Mayor at this time?
I will say that we know that one of the big barriers right now is hiring, and so the city administration has been trying to help the coalition and the providers in getting the word out about job openings. Everything we possibly can do to get the information out to the public that there are openings, we need them filled. The pay is going up, it's part-time work, so any help anybody could give be appreciated to the public.
Yeah, Andrew, if you or your staff or the administration staff or team can send us maybe like a flyer or what they're using on social media, I'm sure many of us would be happy to put it in our newsletters or on our Facebook pages or things like that. I certainly do recognize that one of the biggest hurdles besides just money is actually people, the people power behind it all. So we're happy to help. I am, and I feel like I can speak for the rest of the council members on that one.
I think the providers would deeply, deeply appreciate that. We'll make sure that gets to you all.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Council members, we're on item number 2. Do we have a update from the Racial Equity and Policing team today? Hi, Chief Brown.
Madam Chair, we do not. They are scheduled to meet on December 21st, the commission in general, and they will resume their updates in January.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Did we have an update from Chief Brown, Madam Mayor, today?
Yeah.
We do. Okay, Chief,
Chair.
sorry, didn't mean to skip over you. Why don't you take it away?
That's okay. Madam Chair Fowler and Council, it's nice to be with you this afternoon. Next slide, please. One of the main goals of our updated crime control plan that Mayor Mendenhall and myself rolled out probably 6 weeks ago or so is to improve response times. Council, I am happy to report today that we are improving our response times. But there's always more work to do. Improving response times is really a never-ending process. But I'd like to call out the great work of our officers as they respond to those calls and what we're doing to perhaps help those. If you look on the far right column, you'll see the average response time for priority 1 calls. In November, it was 12 minutes and 58 seconds. Compared to October, which is 14 minutes and 16 seconds, the response times are down 1:18 for priority 1 calls, and a far cry shorter than where we were in August. If you look at priority 2 calls for November, they were 20 minutes and 8 seconds. October were 25 minutes and 16 seconds. They're down 5 minutes and 8 seconds in that comparison. And in August, we were at 23:49. Priority 3 calls, those are the lower level calls for service. In November, they were 50 minutes and 59 seconds. In October, they were 1 hour, 19 minutes and 7 seconds. They're down 28 minutes and 7 seconds in that comparison. In August, they were 1 hour, 26 minutes and 37 seconds. Now, that is fantastic. But no, we still have a lot of work to do. But I want to give a big shout out to the officers because they are facing a lot of challenges. They're taking more calls for service. And we looked at the calls for service year to date. In 2020, year to date, and that's from January to December 12th, our officers have handled dispatch calls over 115,000 calls for service. In 2021, our officers have responded to over 120,000 calls for service. That's 5,000 more calls for service this year. So big props to the officers and the work they're doing in the field. One of the things that we've done internally is we look at ways that we can improve our response times. In October 20th, actually, to be exact, we looked at, we found some funding to take our light duty officers, the officers that may be injured or on light duty, and to give them overtime and give them shifts to take telephonic calls. Since October 20th, this team has taken over 1,300 calls for service. What that does is they're taking those lower priority calls for service, the 1s, 2s, and 3s. I mean, they all go into the queue, and our officers have to respond to those calls. But if they can take the lower calls and take those out of the queue, then our officers can focus on those emergency 911 calls that we really need them to respond on. So along with this program and looking at ways that we can do our call diversion, our police civilian response team and the things that we're doing, we're really making an impact, and I wanted to share that with you today. Next slide, please. The other thing we wanted to update you on today was staffing. Here's our staffing numbers. Now, these numbers really haven't changed a whole lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is good. We're still down our 57 vacancies. Our authorized staffing is at 571. But here's the good news. We're working very hard with HR. Deb Alexander and her team have been great partners. They've helped us with recruitment and outreach. We are starting a class of new hires in January. And we're not just, and I want to reiterate to you and what Pastor Davis said as he sat as a member of the Rep Commission. We want the highest quality of officers to serve our community because that's what they deserve. And we will not look for quantity versus quality. We will always go for the best officer that Salt Lake City needs and expects. So we will be starting a class of 30 in January. If you look here at the next slide, this is class 154. They're in the academy right now. They're happy and they're hungry. That's why they're all holding their food that we gave them last week for our Christmas dinner. Because of COVID, we couldn't do it in person, so we handed out the box lunches. But they're in the academy, and they're eager to get out and be joining our ranks here soon. Next slide. Here's a timeline of where we are with the recruitment. 154. Those are 4 of the officers that you saw right there. They are the new hire class. There's 18 of them. We expect them to hit the street on June 20th of 2022. We've talked about class 155. That's the lateral hires. There are 5 of them. Now they're in FTO right now. They're training with a field officer. They'll be on their own starting January of 2022. And here's the good news. Class 156 will be the 30 officers that will be joining our ranks. They've been hired, they've been interviewed, and they're excited to get going. But they'll be in the academy starting January. They will hit the streets in October of 2022. An interesting fact about class 156 is the diversity. You know that we've worked very hard within the police department to increase our diversity. We've heard the conversations about making our police department look like the communities we serve. Next slide, please. I want you to know, Council, that we are doing just that. Here's the demographics of class 156. 66% of the class is diverse, and not only by ethnicity or gender. That's an amazing stat. And so that's really a compliment to the type of officers that are looking at an agency that's very progressive, that's inclusive, and they want to be part of this organization. So I'm very proud to share that with you today, and we'll be moving forward in our recruitment efforts as always. And then, Council, if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for that update, Chief Brown. I am going to reserve questions for right now. We're running terribly late, and so I want to make sure that we get to the other items. But thank you so much, and I encourage council members that if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to Chief Brown. He generally, I guess I wake him up or he never sleeps because he'll answer my questions at 2 in the morning. So I don't suggest that you do that, but all right. With that, council members, we are moving over to item number 3, which is our resolution for extending the local emergency declaration. I have Katie Lewis listed here, but I believe really I may be able to give something, and then Katie is here, I think, to answer questions, if that's okay, Katie. The idea behind this extension is essentially coming down to the school mask mandate. It was we extended it until the first of the year. However, this is our last council meeting, and I got some calls from the school district saying, do you guys mind discussing it so that all the teachers and the students and the parents know what to do when they come back from winter break? And I thought, well, that's a genius idea. So we put it on today's agenda to discuss how we want to move forward with the mask mandate. And so I'll open it up for a little bit of discussion there.
And Madam Chair, after looking at the numbers and then looking at the vaccination and how well the city is doing and the school district is doing, I really look forward to continuing the mask mandate for students across all age groups and doing basically the same thing and moving it all the way to the spring break time frame.
Okay. So, Chris, sorry, Councilmember Wharton, I saw you reach.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say, I think a lot of Salt Lake City residents understand and believe that masks work, and but I think that this is even further evidence that our district numbers are staying lower and that kids and staff and teachers are staying safer than what we're seeing in other districts. So I hope that, I agree that this should continue at least until spring break. And I hope that we can keep people safe through the rest of the cold and flu season and all that.
Wonderful. Any other council members have thoughts or discussions on this? We will be, what I'm hearing right now for the potential motion sheet, which will be, we'll address in the formal meeting is, and maybe we can do a straw poll, is that we extend the mask mandate to spring break, which is sometime in March, I think, and we can get that exact date for the motion sheet. But so I'm looking for a straw poll. I mean, I just gave a straw poll, so show your feelings if that's what you're interested in. All right. If we can just have staff get that ready for the formal meeting, we're ready to go. Katie, did I miss anything? Great. She gave me a thumbs up. We are on item number 4, which is budget amendment number 4, and I'd like to invite Ben Ludke to the table. And I believe we also have Mary Beth, our Chief Financial Officer, and John Vike, the City Budget Director, available if need be. But Ben, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The council had several questions specifically related to the Park Ranger program, as well as the Community Commitment program. And given the time, instead of me going through them, I want you to know that the responses from the administration are in the staff report. There's an update from the administration regarding CARES Act funding. This was all appropriated last fiscal year, and there is a federal deadline to spend the funds that is quickly approaching. The Finance Department has been reviewing with every one of the recipients of the CARES Act funds, and this takes some time because there were multiple recipients that are entities separate from the city. And the latest information is that there will be about $47,000 of unused CARES Act funding. So this means if it is not put to use, it would need to be returned to the federal government. An option to retain that $47,000 is for the council to take a straw poll today. It needs to be before the end of the calendar year. The straw poll would be to use that $47,000 for personnel expenses in the fire department. This is the same approach that was taken last December when the city knew that it would be receiving some CARES Act funding, a pass-through from the county, but we didn't know how much. The reason this is allowed is because the Treasury guidance for CARES Act has a presumption that firefighter time, and thus the cost for the firefighters, is related to the pandemic because they spend a significant amount of their time on medical calls. So if there's interest in not returning the $47,000, the administration is asking for a straw poll so we can use it for firefighter personnel expenses.
Well, I don't ever like returning money, so I don't. Council members, is there any discussion on that particular part of this? With that, I will present or propose a straw poll that we use this money, this CARES Act money, for firefighter time. Is that good enough for everybody? Show your feelings. And that passes unanimously. So thank you, Ben.
There's also a draft motion sheet. It's attachment 4. I also handed out a copy last week when we were here for the meeting. If there are any questions or items that the council wanted to change, it would be great to know that now so we can update the motion sheet before you consider voting this evening. And I can go through it, but I figured I would jump to council questions given the time.
Yeah, council members, if you need to look at the motion sheet, we can get it printed and passed out, or it's in your packets. But is there discussion on the motion sheet?
Madam Chair, one question on the funding for the Ramada Inn. I think it said 400,000, and the discussion was for $1 million, and then other discussions about the other 600,000 remaining. Where was that $600,000 put?
So the motion sheet does not appropriate the $600,000. It has a staff note saying that the $600,000 would be pending future discussion by the council. So the budget amendment would remain open if you adopted the motion sheet as written. It would not appropriate that $600,000, but the budget amendment would be open for next year, next month, whenever the council wants to have that follow-up discussion, and then you could act on those funds.
Oh, because we already have a couple items that are going into January in budget amendment 4, and that would be included in that additional January motion.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I, just before we jump into this discussion, Ben, I appreciate the answers in the staff report, but I had asked for information about the number of calls that were coming to Foothills Trailhead's entrance, and I saw that that isn't answered, so I still want to have that discussion and that question answered. Not a question, just a reminder. Thank you.
We'll follow up.
Council members?
I would just, following up on what Dan mentioned, according to the straw poll that we did last week, that we were set to push forward the full 600K as well, the full $1 million allocated to this project, to the Ramada Overflow Shelter. And so I would love to see some wording of that in the motion.
As I said before in the, with our, the straw poll that we made last week, still stand by that. I really, though, want to make sure that a significant amount of this money is going to the community and to businesses. Okay. Thank you. I still want to make sure a significant amount of this 600,000 is going to businesses and not just to operations. So I would love to hear more about that. Or businesses, I should say, just the community in general. It could be businesses, it could be community events. I don't want to go back on or diminish or water down in any way the commitment that we made to the neighborhood to try to do some mitigation. And I think if we put all of that towards operating, we know it's going to get used there. I'm not saying that it isn't needed there and that it wouldn't be well used, but I don't see another opportunity for us to get that money back once it's spent. And I don't see an opportunity for us to get that money to the community from other sources. So I'd love to hear more about what the plan is on that going forward.
Chris, can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yes.
How would we appropriate that 600,000? Because from the straw poll, everyone sort of agreed that 400,000 would go towards security based on the numbers that we saw and the commitment from the county. But like, how at this point, without knowing what thank you so much, what the gap in operations is, do we today appropriate $600,000 and say, hey, P.S., by the way, don't spend this all because we want it for the community? When, to your point, once it's spent, we can't ever get it back. And if they're like, we really have this gap, and they said we could use it, and then whatever was left over, we can give out to the community. Not give out, but you know what I mean. We can
Yes.
use in the community. But then, like, how do we actually appropriate that? Do we say half of it can go through to operations and the other half has to go to the community? Do we say, like, do we wait on appropriating that 600,000 until we know what the gap looks like? And then, I know I'm kind of asking compound questions. I'm expecting an objection from you, but, and then the other concern I have is that, like, what about any sort of mitigating resources for the other areas that are also, have resource centers or warming centers or overnight flow shelters or things like that. And so I guess that's where I'm stumped on, just like allocating the 600,000, and it's like giving a kid, $20 and saying,
Make it last all week.
make it last all week, or bring me the change. And it's like, well, here's your penny.
Yeah.
You said change. So those are my concerns. I'm happy to have any discussion on that with everyone.
Yeah, I share those concerns. It seems to, the answer I think that I had 72 hours ago is different than the answer from 24 hours ago, and then till now. So I would love to hear from other people about what they think, or from Andrew or the administration about if they have any ideas or suggestions on how we can do that. But that's what I would like to. That was my intent of the straw poll from last week. That's what I want to keep doing moving forward. So I guess I wanted to have a check-in on that and hear from other people, and if that's how people still feel.
I would, first off, the mayor was kind enough to put forward the $1 million towards shelter anywhere in the county, towards specifically winter overflow shelter, which this is that project that was intended. Now, certainly we didn't intend it to be in this location, but nonetheless, that's where it is now. And for it to be successful, I would very much like to see, because it is in my neighborhood, would like to see it fully funded enough to disrupt the culture of what we are experiencing currently in that space. The Ramada, the Denny's across the street, the Love's Truck Stop, the 7-Eleven are 4 of the top 10 locations for calls for service in this city. And I think that taking the Ramada out of that equation, by implementing significant safety and security measures in that space, by fencing off the entire area, by having on-site security and fire watch there within the space, as well as the $816,000 that we're looking at for overtime officers, having 4 overtime officers available 20 hours a day for the entirety of the project. I think that stands to actually disrupt the culture of crime in that vicinity, and can actually greatly improve the neighborhood, much like we are doing right now in Madsen Park, having fenced that off a week ago to be able to disrupt the culture of crime that is occurring there. This can give us the same opportunity over here. So I see this as a significant benefit actually to the community, to be able to transition this property into something more useful, functional, and beneficial, with that additional security presence being there.
Yeah, and I don't. 400,000 for security, I think we're all 100% on board with, and I agree with all of that analysis, and that's why I, even though the vote was difficult, made the decision that I did. The majority of us did a couple weeks ago, but what about the commitment to the businesses in the community for mitigation? I'm worried about that all of a sudden.
I just think it's much like Councilmember or Council Chair Fowler mentioned, that it's a little tough to allocate that right now at the very last moment with no specifics. And we've got this project that very much needs to open immediately and needs at least some peace of mind. They are still looking to acquire additional funding streams of the $1 million that we're discussing here, with $400K already specifically devoted to the overtime officers. The other $600K, we can certainly prioritize safety and security measures over our day-to-day operations. And there's an additional $1.8 million coming in from state and county sources as well. So we're certainly not the only ones contributing here to this project. I think we're putting in our fair share to make sure that this project is successful for that neighborhood.
Councilmember Peter Eschler, did you want to say something? And I am going to ask council members and people at the tables, because we just got a comment, if you'll remove your mask when you're giving comments, it's difficult for people to understand. And I can only imagine if people are watching via WebEx that it's probably even more difficult for them as well. So just keep that in mind, please.
It's not that this is an unnecessary expenditure. It just feels like our contribution to solving this problem this winter is disproportionate to a county-wide coalition. We are still contributing the lion's share of the money. We are still contributing a zoning amendment that would allows them to function. We're still contributing the safety of people who are living on Redwood Road and North Temple. This is a disproportionate request out of us. It hasn't been confirmed to me that we have exhausted all of their avenues. Other municipalities are getting ARPA funds. They should be contributing to this county-wide issue while we do the sweat equity. And I'm really having difficulty with this concept that we're telling people that we're not going to keep doing this, and we keep just doing it for them. At some point, we are responsible for a learned helplessness from the other municipalities and the state agencies. At some point, we are not responsible for all the negative things that happen to people. We have to draw some firm lines somewhere, and this seems like a really clear place, while everyone is flush with ARPA funds, to draw some lines.
I would just say that I think the clear place to draw that line would have been a couple weeks ago before we approved the land use zone.
I mean, we had 24 hours of public notice. That's the other problem with us always being the seasonal last minute issue. So since we're in a less than ideal situation, I think making beauty from ashes on behalf of our budgets and what we can do for our community. I mean, has any of this funding been secured? I've read so much on this. Ben, didn't you send us a communication that said our initial MOU said that we would be responsible for safety and security, but operations were not in our purview? Was it you? I'm sorry, I've read so many things from so many people. I don't mean to put you on the spot if it wasn't from you.
It wasn't from me. And I share your struggle to keep up with all the information on this fast-moving issue.
Yeah, but that was that the initial agreement, and now we're being tapped for operational funds?
Thank you. I agree with Ben. It is hard to keep up with all of the information. I think that, in our discussions with both the provider, the county, and the state on this, we have tried to promote the idea that, we are going to host this based on the council's generosity around the land use issue. The $1 million that you're appropriating to public safety is also a huge contribution, and that we're promoting the idea that others should step up on those operational costs. So the administration doesn't have a recommendation for you or a proposal or request on the operations costs, but have brought to you the request from the provider on that. I don't think that means that other requests aren't also moving forward to those other entities, but that is the information we have from the provider right now. I think those operational costs will continue to adjust as opening gets later and later. But also just want to make sure that the administration is understanding from the council what the business mitigation request is at this point. We, again, don't have a specific recommendation, but are hearing from council, and also I think agree that we should put some money towards business support, mitigation, community support, whatever that looks like, but want to make sure that we're doing it in a equitable way with the communities across the city who are experiencing impacts from resource centers, whether permanent or temporary. So we're here to take direction on that and are happy to come back with a recommendation in January, similar with the operating costs. Information is what we're here to give, but don't have a recommendation.
Thank you, Rachel. Council members? Chris?
Is there, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so what, is there any danger, what are the risks of waiting until January
For the business or for the operating costs?
for anything other than the 400,000 for officers, for security?
I don't think that there is a specific danger regarding the business mitigation costs right now, particularly with, the business that's located at the temporary shelter at this point planning on staying and that shelter not opening right now. So I don't think there's any harm in waiting until January to decide on specific appropriation of the funds. I will ask Andrew to talk about the operating costs, though, if you want more on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Well, he's coming up. Can I just ask a general question? Is there such a thing as being like a lender of last resort on this? Like, can we require the service provider to demonstrate attempts and failures before any more money gets allocated?
We could certainly make it contingent.
Thank you. The numbers are difficult to track because they're changing a lot right now. The intention had been to open the Ramada option as soon as possible once everything was satisfied. Staffing shortages are problematic, put it that way. And so the longer it goes, obviously the lower the projected cost for the season would be. Right now they're reporting 600,000 is about where they're at with the gap. The state, Wayne Aderhauser, as the coordinator at that level, has been informed about the discussions we had about the county and city offering security monies towards that, and that would the state be willing to step in with operation costs. They can't have that formal discussion until the new year. And so it's hard for Shelter the Homeless in this capacity, who is the leasee essentially, or the leaseor of it, to say definitively if they have another option or not at this point. They won't know probably till January or February when the state homelessness council can meet, and then if it is recommended to the state legislative executive appropriations. So it's just difficult to say right now what the other options would be feasibly. As far as the impact on operations at this point, not having funding, I'm not really sure how to respond to that right now. I think there is some funding obviously that I think Councilmember Ferris alluded to earlier for operations. It's not enough for the full season. Now, the later that it opens, the lower those costs go. So I'm just not sure I'm in a place to say exactly what would happen. I do know that they have some bills to pay up front on January 1st, and they are working right now between their current funders to figure out if they can make sure that happens. But they will have a gap going forward into the new year.
Council members, any further discussion on this? I think this is on the motion for our formal meeting. I think, as everyone knows, people are always, you don't have to just go straight off of the motion sheet, or you can always make up your own motion. That's the beauty of all of this. So I don't want to, yes, Cindy?
Just one point. I think that a couple of council members had us prepare draft motions for them, but we aren't sure if anyone wanted to follow through with those. So tell Ben, and we'll get copies of those for you.
Thank you.
Things have been
moving way too quickly.
We've lost our minds.
Yes, way too quickly. And there is a lot of information that has apparently just come up quick. So I think I feel I want to give space for more discussion, but I also don't want to give space for more repetition. I feel we've heard people's opinions on things and where they want to go, and if you have something that hasn't been heard, or you're just dying to say, let me know. Otherwise, I think we can move forward and really decide at the voting table. Does that sound okay with everyone? I'm seeing most of my council members shake their heads in the yes way. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here and answering questions. We are on to, again, every time, budget amendment, but it's agenda item number 5, which is a board appointment to the Art Design Advisory Board with Michael Mejia. Is Michael with us? Hello, Michael.
Can you see me?
We can, and we can hear
Okay.
you. Welcome to our city council meeting. Thank you so much for joining us. You're on our big screen. So
great.
why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and why you're interested on being on the Art Design Advisory Board?
Well, thanks so much for having me and taking the time to put me on your very full agenda. My name is Michael Mejia. I am an author, a novelist, and professor at the University of Utah. I teach in the graduate creative writing program there, and also teach undergraduate courses in literature and creative writing. I've been at the U now since 2012. That's what brought my wife and I here to Salt Lake City, is the position that came available on the program. And we've just, have really enjoyed our time here. It was a very sort of unexpected move for us. I'm originally from California. My wife is from Louisiana. We were living down south, and when this job came up, I leapt at the opportunity, actually, largely because of the reputation of the U and the program. And we've just had an incredible 9 years here, exploring the state and the region and the city, which we have really enjoyed sharing with family and friends who come to visit. We've had quite a few visitors over the years, and they're always as surprised about Salt Lake as we were. And we're just very, very excited to have the opportunity to show it off. So a friend of ours, a former coworker of my wife's at the UMFA, where she works as the director of PR and marketing, invited me to apply for this position, knowing my creative interests and also my association with the UMFA through my wife. And so I leapt at the opportunity. I mean, just an opportunity to get further involved in the life of the city, the creative life of the city, which I participate in through the creative writing program, and just to to have this opportunity, as they say, to be in discussion with people about the public life of the city, the public image of the city, how the city sort of sees itself, imagines itself, and another opportunity to sort of meet new people in the city, meet my neighbors, and sort of have interactions with them through artistic works.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I think council members, do we have any questions or comments for Michael? I don't see any, so you're off the hook there. We really do appreciate when people volunteer their times for these important boards for the city. So thank you so much for wanting to take some of your time and donate it to the city for us. You will be on our future consent agenda later this evening in our formal meeting. You certainly do not have to log on to win your awarded prize of spending your time with the city, but you're more than welcome to if you'd like. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Our next board appointment, council members, is Andy Robertson, and this is an appointment to the Business Advisory Board. Hello, Andy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
I think we can hear you okay. We might need to turn you up a little bit, but we'll see.
All right, I'll try to speak up a little bit louder. Maybe that'll help.
That's great. So, Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on this board?
Fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity to share my desire to join the Business Advisory Board today. My name is Andy Robertson. I am essentially a lifelong resident of Utah. I'm a 25-year career healthcare, med device, life science professional, working at some of our largest medical device companies here in the Valley to some of the smallest where you find me today. And I want to use that voice, my experience, to help the city deliver on the blueprint for innovation in healthcare that I think was presented to the committee maybe a couple of weeks ago on how to grow Salt Lake City's healthcare innovation here in town. Because it's been a great career for me, I think it can be a great career for other folks. It's been great to my family. And at the end of the day, we're trying to help patients, and that's what matters most. And if there's things that we can do to try to incentivize additional life science companies to come on board, to join us here in Salt Lake City, so that we're not a well-kept secret, so that we can trumpet our successes and do amazing things together, I think that'd be fantastic. So that's what I'd like to join.
Well, thank you so much. And like I was mentioning to Mr. Mejia, it really is important that we have interested citizens wanting to donate their time to the city. We depend on these boards quite a bit, actually. So thank you so much for your time and wanting to do this. Council members, do we have any questions for Mr. Robertson? I don't see any. And as I mentioned to Mr. Mejia, you don't have to be present to win, but you will be on the consent agenda later this evening at our formal meeting. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, Andy. So,
Thank you.
Okay, council members, we are now on to the report of the chair and vice chair. And I actually have something to report. I, at this time, would like to take a moment to recognize Mr. Russell Weeks. Russell, I won't make you come up and sit in the hot seat if you don't want to, but Russell is here in our audience today. And Russell, I want to just say a few things. As many of you may be aware, Russell is retiring at the end of the month after almost 3 decades of working for Salt Lake City. Russell is a mentor, a professional, a poet, a storyteller, a philosopher, a humorist, a friend, and the living memory of the City Council. You know, I certainly did not realize this and know this. I knew that Russell had come to the council office after covering years of city politics for the Tribune, which really helped him in wrangling the cats of the city council and doing the great work that he does and has always done for the city council, looking at different perspectives, asking the hard questions, and doing all of the hard work until the job was done. This is the part I did not realize, is that Russell apparently is quite the historian. And many of our staff friends got to enjoy long walks, lunchtime walks with Russell, where he would often tell funny and interesting stories about Salt Lake City. Somebody said that it seemed like you had a story about every building and around every corner, especially as it related to here in downtown. And that with each of these stories, you brought them to life with the way that you would describe characters and the issues that surrounded those buildings or those stories based on issues that city councils had addressed in the past. I know that for many staff, these stories and these times will be sorely missed, but the stories will be retold. And so Russell is also very known for having a unique quote that perfectly captures every moment. And one of the ones that staff provided of this, and I think now I should probably put it on a t-shirt and wear it to every council meeting or a mug, is that one thing I love about this job is it's always one step away from failure. And believe me, that's how I feel sometimes. And I can attest that's probably how many of us feel. Russell also was oftentimes the voice of the council, writing letters for the council, speeches, talking points, and more than a few laws for the city over the years. Some big things that Russell has worked on over his time are the Olympics, nothing big, just those. The tracks line, all of downtown. Transportation, certainly within our legislature, I've relied on Russell's knowledge more than once. Our ability to try to help our communities experiencing homelessness, the airport, and of course the library. I think that Russell really does have a great way to bring people together through his unique perspective and during difficult times. Again, one staff member said that one of the quotes that was often heard from Russell was by Mark Twain, and also going on a mug of mine. Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from making bad decisions. I feel like that relates here and in my personal life, but Russell, you have certainly played an integral role in Salt Lake City. You've made an indelible mark on dozens of council members, and dare I say dozens, if not more than dozens, staff members. You really have been a mentor to so many people, and you will be missed. We are excited that you get to enjoy the next phase and enjoy your retirement. Everyone. Just before I let you say anything, Russell, I do want to present you with this book, and it is a little memory book from everyone in the staff and council members of your 27 years here in service. So, thank you.
Madam Chair, may I say one thing? It's always been a pleasure to serve the public in this city, and I understand how hard everybody works here to do that.
You have to come up. Now you have to come to the hot seat and a microphone.
Well, again, let me say it's always been a pleasure to serve the public in this city. And if you look on that wall of council members, I've known most of them, not the first ones, but most of them. And they have all worked very hard to make things right for Salt Lake City. I should say that this last council, I have never seen anybody work harder than the council members here. And I think a reason for that is that the city has grown into itself. And if I can, let me leave you with one final quote that's one of my favorites, and that is, it's from Pascal, and it goes this way. It's, the least movement affects all nature. The entire ocean changes because of a rock. And sometimes it feels like you're wheeling a rock up the hill here, but it's going to get to the ocean, so I appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Russell. I'd also like to just say thank you to your wife, Kathy, for lending Russell to us over the last 27 years. We couldn't have done it without him, and I know that he couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much. Council members, with that, I believe, unless there are any announcements from Cindy.
Sorry, one quick thing. They just wanted me to confirm with you that they have made, the staff has made the changes that you asked for at the last council meeting on your annual schedule. We noticed one thing, and that is that we have to correct to state that you are now at hybrid meetings as opposed to the remote meetings, and so we'll do that. I have a list of the changes that were made, and the changes were included in your packet. So if anyone wants to go through that or anything, I can forward the items to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Does anyone else have any questions on that right now? Okay, we will adjourn for our dinner. We will reconvene at 7 p.m. here with some more lovely speeches by all of us. So we'll see you all then.